The look on my son-in-law's face when the Port Authority officer placed a heavy hand on his shoulder is something I intend to carry with me to my grave. It was a mixture of sheer, unadulterated terror and the kind of confusion you only see in people who have spent their entire lives thinking they're the smartest person in the room. Marcus looked at me, his mouth agape, his expensive silk tie fluttering in the salty breeze of the Savannah docks, and for the first time in 3 years, he was speechless. But to understand why he was currently being escorted toward a windowless office while I calmly sipped coffee from a thermos, you have to understand that Marcus never realized one simple truth. You can buy a man's company, but you can't buy his reputation, and he certainly couldn't buy mine. I built Miller Global Logistics from the ground up. I started in 1984 with one beat-up Mack truck and a contract to haul timber. For 40 years, I lived and breathed those docks. I knew the name of every crane operator, every customs agent, and every tugboat captain from here to Charleston. I raised my daughter, Sarah, on the proceeds of those long nights and early mornings. I paid for her private school, her Ivy League tuition, and eventually her lavish wedding to Marcus, a man who looked at my grease-stained hands like they were a disease. For the first few years, I tolerated Marcus. He was a consultant with an MBA and a wardrobe that cost more than my first fleet of trucks. I brought him into the family business because Sarah asked me to. She told me he had vision and could help me modernize. I should have seen the red flags then. It started small, comments at Sunday dinner about my outdated filing systems or how my handshake deals were a liability. I laughed it off. I thought he was just young and eager. But Marcus wasn't eager to help. He was eager to own. That should have been my wake-up call. But I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that he'd eventually learn that in the logistics world, relationships are the only currency that matters. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The disrespect started piling up about 18 months ago. It began with Marcus accidentally leaving me out of board meetings with our major shipping partners. Then came the rebranding. He wanted to change the name from Miller Global to MGL Solutions. He said Miller sounded too folksy and blue-collar. Marcus, I told him during a particularly tense meeting in my own office, this company is built on that name. People trust a Miller. They don't know what an MGL is. He just smirked, that thin, oily smile he always wore. Exactly, Arthur. They don't know what it is yet. It's about scalability. It's about the future. You've done a great job building the foundation, but let's be honest, you're a dinosaur in a digital age. You're still using a Rolodex while the rest of the world is using AI-driven supply chain algorithms. Sarah didn't help. She'd become his echo. Dad, maybe Marcus is right, she told me over coffee one Saturday. You've worked so hard. Don't you want to just relax? Go to the golf course? Marcus says the stress is going to give you a heart attack. He just wants to take the burden off your shoulders. It wasn't a burden. It was my life. But they didn't see it that way. To them, I was just a stubborn old man sitting on a pile of equity they wanted to liquidate. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I arrived at the office to find my personal effects packed into 3 cardboard boxes sitting in the hallway. Marcus was in my chair, his feet up on my mahogany desk, the desk my father gave me when I passed my first $1 million in revenue. What is this, Marcus? I asked, my voice low and steady.
It's an intervention, Arthur, he said, not even bothering to stand up. He handed me a folder. The board, which, as you know, I've spent the last 6 months restructuring, has voted. Given your recent lapses in judgment regarding the New Jersey contracts, we've decided to move you to an emeritus position. You'll keep your salary for 2 years, but you're officially retired, effective immediately. Lapses in judgment? I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my hands at my sides. I've never missed a delivery in 40 years. You refused to automate the customs clearing process, Marcus snapped. You insisted on personal check-ins with the Port Authority. It's inefficient. It's old school. And frankly, it's embarrassing. Sarah agrees. She signed off as the primary shareholder of the family trust. That was the knife in the heart. My own daughter had helped him push me out. I looked at the boxes, then at the man sitting in my father's chair. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a punch. I just nodded. I see, I said. Well, Marcus, I hope those algorithms are as smart as you think they are. I walked out with my boxes and didn't look back. But as I drove home, the hurt started to turn into something else. It turned into a cold, hard clarity. They thought I was a dinosaur. They thought the old ways were just sentimental nonsense. They didn't realize that in the world of international shipping, the old ways are the only thing keeping the gears turning. If that was all, I probably would have let it go. I would have moved to the coast and spent my days fishing. But then came the phone calls from my old drivers, men I'd worked with for decades. Marcus was cutting their benefits. He was outsourcing their routes to 1099 contractors to optimize the bottom line. He was firing people who had been with me since the beginning. And that's when I realized they didn't see me as their father or a founder. They saw me as a bank account to be emptied. Something in me shifted that day. I didn't say a word to Sarah or Marcus. I didn't answer their checking in texts. But I started making calls. I spent the next 2 months getting everything in order. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did. You see, Marcus wanted the big fish. He wanted the contract with the Mediterranean Shipping Syndicate, a deal worth roughly $40 million a year. It was the white whale I'd been chasing for a decade. Marcus thought he could land it with a fancy PowerPoint and a promise of digital integration. What he didn't know was that the syndicate doesn't care about apps. They care about security. They care about who is personally responsible when a $200 million cargo goes missing. I knew the syndicate was sending a trial shipment, a massive, high-priority load of specialized medical equipment and heavy machinery. It required specific permits, specific dock space, and most importantly, a verified master signature from the owner of the logistics firm, registered with the Port Authority Security Manifest. Marcus, in his infinite wisdom, had updated the corporate registry to his name, but he'd forgotten one tiny detail. The Port of Savannah is a federal jurisdiction, and the security clearances for high-risk, high-value cargo are tied to the individual's background check and a 10-year history of clean audits. Marcus hadn't even been in the state for 10 years. I knew exactly when the shipment was arriving. I also knew that Marcus had bypassed the traditional human oversight protocols to save $50,000 in port fees, relying instead on his new software to auto-clear the cargo. The day of the reckoning was a Tuesday. It was gray and drizzling. I drove down to the docks in my old Ford F-150, wearing my old work jacket. I didn't go to the office. I went straight to the Port Authority's main gate. I saw Marcus's silver Porsche parked illegally near the loading zone. He was standing there with 4 representatives from the syndicate, men in sharp European suits who looked very, very unhappy. There were 3 Port Authority vehicles with their lights flashing, and a line of trucks backed up for half a mile. As I walked up, I could hear Marcus screaming, "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of MGL Solutions. That cargo is time sensitive. Every hour it sits there costs my clients 6 figures. Open the gate and clear the manifest." The officer standing in his way was Sergeant Vance. Vance and I had played poker every Tuesday for 20 years. His father had been a driver for me back in the 80s. Vance was a mountain of a man with a buzz cut and eyes like flint. He wasn't budging. "Sir," Vance said, his voice a low rumble, "the manifest is flagged. The digital signature provided doesn't match the Tier 1 security clearance on file for this pier. Until a verified master arrives, this cargo is being impounded for a secondary federal inspection. That takes 48 hours. "That's impossible," Marcus shrieked. "I updated the filings. I'm the owner." "The LLC owns the truck, son," Vance said, his eyes shifting past Marcus to see me approaching. "But the LLC doesn't have a security clearance. A person does." The syndicate reps were whispering among themselves, looking at their watches. Their lead man, a tall Italian named Lorenzo, stepped forward. "Mr. Marcus, you assured us that your modern systems had bypassed these bureaucratic hurdles. If this cargo is delayed 48 hours, the refrigeration units will fail and the contract is voided. We will also be seeking damages for the breach." Marcus looked like he was about to vomit. His face was a sickly shade of gray. I can fix this. Just give me the phone. I'll call the governor's office." That's when I stepped into the circle. "Morning, Vance," I said calmly. Vance's face broke into a wide grin. "Morning, Arthur. You're up early for a retired man." Marcus spun around, his eyes bulging. "Arthur, what are you doing here? Get out of here. This is a professional matter. You're not even part of this company anymore." I ignored him. I looked at Lorenzo and the other syndicate reps. "Gentlemen, I'm Arthur Miller. I believe you're looking for the man who holds the Tier 1 clearance for Pier 14. Lorenzo looked me up and down, seeing the grease under my fingernails and the calm in my eyes. He looked back at Marcus, then at me. "You are the founder?" "I am," I said, "and I'm also the only person on this dock who can sign for that cargo. But there's a problem.
What problem? Marcus yelled. Just sign the damn papers, Arthur. I'll give you a bonus. Whatever you want. I looked Marcus dead in the eye. The problem, Marcus, is that I don't work for MGL Solutions. As you reminded me 3 months ago, I'm retired. And since you've spent the last 90 days firing my friends and dismantling the safety protocols I spent 40 years building, I don't think I feel like doing you any favors. The silence that followed was heavy. The only sound was the rhythmic thud of a crane in the distance. Arthur, please, Marcus stammered, his voice dropping an octave. You're embarrassing me in front of our partners. They aren't your partners, Marcus, I said. They're my guests, and you're trespassing. Vance stepped forward then. That's right. Marcus, I've been looking at these filings you pushed through last week. It seems you listed yourself as the sole point of contact for hazardous materials, but you don't have a hazard mod certification, do you? Marcus blinked. It's a digital oversight. The software doesn't override federal law, Vance said. He looked at me. Arthur, does this man know you? I let the question hang in the air for a long, slow moment. I watched the sweat bead on Marcus's forehead. I watched the syndicate reps take a collective step away from him, realizing they were tied to a sinking ship. He thinks he does, I said finally. He thinks I'm a dinosaur. He thinks I'm a bank account. But he doesn't know the first thing about me. Vance nodded. In that case, Marcus, you're being detained for questioning regarding a fraudulent security filing on a federal manifest. You can't just sign a name you don't have the clearance for. As the officers led a sputtering, panicked Marcus away, I turned to Lorenzo. He was looking at me with a new sense of respect. Mr. Miller, he said, it seems we were misinformed about the leadership of this firm. I have a new firm, I said, pulling a fresh business card from my pocket. It didn't have a fancy logo. It just said Miller and Associates. I took 60% of my old drivers with me last month. We have the clearances, we have the trucks, and we have the reputation. If you'd like to transfer that manifest to a company that actually knows how to move it, I can have that gate open in 10 minutes. Lorenzo didn't even hesitate. He took the card and shook my hand, a firm, old-school handshake. Please, Mr. Miller, save our cargo. By the time the sun came out, the cargo was moving. By the time the sun went down, the syndicate had officially pulled their contract from MGL Solutions and signed a 5-year deal with me. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Without the syndicate contract, the modernized MGL Solutions collapsed under the weight of the debt Marcus had taken on to buy his fancy software and his Porsche. The board, the one Marcus had handpicked, turned on him in an instant. Sarah tried to call me, of course. She cried on the voicemail, talking about family and how could I do this to them. I didn't call back for a week. When I finally did, I was sitting on my porch, watching the tide come in. Sarah, I said, I didn't do anything to you. I just let Marcus be the genius he claimed to be. If his vision was so great, it shouldn't have fallen apart just because an old dinosaur showed up at the docks. She didn't have an answer for that. Marcus ended up losing the house and the car. He's back in some entry-level consulting job, though I hear he's struggling because his reputation in the logistics world is, well, it's not existent. Sarah and I are speaking again, slowly. She's working as a teacher now, away from the corporate world that poisoned her perspective. She's humbler. She looks at me differently now, not as a burden, but as the man who built everything she ever took for granted. I'm still working, but only when I want to. I've promoted my longtime dispatcher to run the day-to-day. My drivers have their benefits back, and then some. Every Tuesday, I still go down to the docks to see Vance and the boys. Marcus still sends me emails sometimes, trying to apologize or asking for a consulting role. I never reply. I just delete them and go back to my coffee. My daughter calls every Sunday now. She asks for my advice on things, real things, not just spreadsheets. It's funny how that works. Sometimes you have to let everything break just to show people who's been holding it all together the whole time. And me, I've never slept better. In the end, the old ways didn't just save my business, they saved my dignity, and you can't put a price on that.